right, so today we're welcoming back to Two Sides of Fi our friend, Dr. Jordan Grumet. You may know him as Doc G from his Earn and Invest podcast. If you don't know him, he's a hospice physician, he's an author, podcaster, and Jason and I happen to think he's one of the most thoughtful voices in the personal finance space right now. And he has a new book called The Purpose Code. And for me, as I get ready to transition away from full-time work and into early retirement, this topic of finding purpose is especially relevant. It's kind of top of mind for me right now. So Jordan, I want to ask you, you distinguish between two kinds of purpose in the book. What's the distinction between the two? And was it always obvious to you that there actually was one? Because I just haven't seen it framed this way before.
It actually wasn't obvious at all. You guys know I wrote a book called Taking Stock, and a major premise of that was that purpose should come before our financial framework. In fact, we should build that financial framework around purpose. I went to market this book, and I started talking about it, and people would come up to me at conferences at the end of my talks, and they'd be angry. And the first time this happened, I thought it was a one-off. I'm like, okay, no big deal. Yeah. But it kept happening over and over again, and people would say some variation of, you tell me to find my purpose. I have no idea what purpose is. I've been searching for it forever and I'm getting really frustrated. I don't think there is a purpose. Stop asking me to find my purpose. And so no one had ever framed it to me that way. And when it happened over and over again, I said, I've got to look into this. So I did a deep dive and I found two things that kind of contradicted each other. The first was there are tons and tons of studies that show that having a purpose in life is associated with health, longevity, and happiness. I mean, tons of studies. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there are other studies that show that up to 91% of people at some point in their life get something called purpose anxiety. It means this idea of purpose actually causes anxiety, frustration, depression, exactly like I saw at these conferences. And so I came to the realization that purpose is probably not one thing, it's probably two. And one probably causes the anxiety, and the other is probably more associated with the health, happiness, and longevity. And so I labeled them big P purpose and little p purpose. And the difference is really straightforward. Big P purpose, I like to call it big audacious purpose, because in the United States, if we think it, we can build this idea that we always go big. Right. Big P purpose is goal oriented. It's often very difficult to achieve. It's all or nothing. Either you get there or you fail. And it's usually winner take all. Like only a certain number of people can become billionaires or cure cancer. I like to talk about the presidential election. We can only have one president at a time. So One person wins and everybody else loses. And the problem is with big P purpose is you have to be the right person at the right time, saying the right things with the right genetics and a good deal of luck. And most of us just aren't all those things. And so we fail and feel frustrated. Contrast that to little P purpose. Little P purpose is not goal oriented, it's process oriented. So we're talking about doing things that fill you up, that excite you while you're doing them, regardless of whether you reach a pre-specified goal or not. These are abundant, right? So big P purpose feels scarcity mindset oriented, but this is abundance. Think about the millions of things we could do that we enjoy doing. Instead of being all or nothing, it's kind of all or all. You can't really fail. And so I found this dichotomy here, and it made the most sense through being a hospice doctor and talking to people at the end of life, being a coach and doing coaching about purpose, doing a mastermind, writing a book about money and life, and also doing this podcast. It all came together, and that's kind of where I came up with this thought process, because the most successful, happy people I saw were deeply engaged in little P purpose.
So Jordan, where do you think, I love that, by the way, I think a natural question I have is, what's the origin of people feeling like they have to have this big P purpose? Because bringing it back to the FIRE community, one of the things we've seen time and time again online, and sometimes even in comments directed to us, is, well, I retired and I don't know what to do. I thought I would have it figured out and this grandiose thing would happen next. And you know what? It didn't. And I'm disappointed.
We are being inundated at every turn with big P purpose. Let's look at social media, TikTok, Instagram. What do we see? We see people with six-pack abs traveling all over the world, running 8-figure businesses and wearing the finest clothes. And guess what? They're putting out these images to sell you something. It's completely self-serving. They want you to buy their product or follow them. Same with marketing and advertising. We watch TV and we see commercials. What are the commercials? They're images of living this big P, beautiful life. because they want to sell you something. But it's not just social media. It's also our family and friends and society. It tells us we have to have these big, audacious jobs. We have to become doctors and lawyers and CPAs, and we have to continue to succeed. But the problem is, often those aren't the right things for us. Like, not all of us can have six-pack abs. Some of us don't have the genetics. Some of us are poor and can't afford the healthy food. Some people don't have the will or the excitement about exercising or eating right, and that's okay. But the problem is, because we're inundated with all these images, it's really hard to let go of society's plans for us. But we also have to realize that those plans don't necessarily serve us. They're serving other people.
So it makes me think, Jordan, as someone who's getting ready to step away from full-time work and who has been someone who's been driven by big P purpose for many years. And I think a lot of people in the fire community can relate to this. If you have your own business, or you're a high achieving professional, or you're a high income earner, that big P striving, I find there's something to that. There's something about doing difficult work. And one of my fears stepping into early retirement, I've expressed this to Jason a lot, is that absent that sort of striving is going to feel really empty. And I feel like there's value there, because even if I may not reach a goal of 7 figures in my business in a year, there's even if I got half of that, it's still pretty good. And it pushes me to do more than what I might have otherwise done if I didn't set that big goal in front of me. So how do you think about this in the context of, big P versus little p, and like, am I just looking at it the wrong way? Am I getting the wrong thing out of it? Or am I actually, is the striving actually the little p?
So here's the thing. Just because you have goals doesn't mean that goals are bad. The point is to be a little bit more goal agnostic. You can strive as much as you want. What makes the difference between little p purpose and big P purpose is not actually the goals, it's enjoying the process. So you want to be just more goal agnostic. So I expect that retirement for you will be engaging and difficult, because you know what? Retirement for me is engaging and hard and challenging. You think doing a podcast, writing books, doing everything I am to marketing, all those things, public speaking, getting up in front of 500 people, this stuff challenges me every day. In fact, I am more engaged and challenged than ever before. Yeah. The difference is I only do things I enjoy the process of doing. And so if you retire and you like achievement and you decide to strive and even have goals like an 8-figure business, here's the question. If you don't reach the goal, will you still be happy? Was it still worth your time to do those daily activities, regardless if you reach the goal or not? If the answer is, I want to have an 8-figure business and I'm going to spend the next 6 months doing stuff I really don't like doing in service of that goal, then you're probably getting it wrong. Yeah. But if you say, hey, I love the process, I love getting in front of the mic, I love building this business, I love whatever it is, and I want to do that every day, you can have goals. But then you don't lose. You don't lose if you meet the goal, and you don't lose if you don't meet the goal, because you've been enjoying the process. And that's the difference. It's whether the process supersedes the goal or not.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Jordan, one of the things I liked about, well, actually, it applies to both books, but I think it ties into this idea, is that you have a lot of real life stories, either from your own history in medicine or from others you've encountered in life. Can you give kind of a practical example of somebody who was struggling in that way and has found now purpose through the enjoyment of doing the things?
So the easiest example is me, right? So my father died when I was 7 years old, and he was 40 years old, and he was a physician. And I thought I could cosmically fix the world by co-opting his version of purpose, taking it on for myself. And if I just did that, it would fix everything that went wrong. And so for me, medicine became big P purpose. And the reason why it was big P, because I thought it was going to fix the fact that my dad died. I thought I was going to go in and save every patient and fix every disease. And when I got there, I found it didn't do either. After 20, 30 years of working so hard to be this really competent physician, I mean, I started at 7, right? And I practiced and still practice into my 50s. It took me decades to get there. But what I finally realized is this wasn't even my genuine sense of purpose. It was my dad that I took on because I thought it could solve a problem. I thought it could mean that I'm enough. If my dad died, it was probably my fault because I was 7, and 7-year-olds think everything's their fault. Mm-hmm. And the way I was going to fix it and I was going to be enough was I was going to become a doctor like him. That was my big P purpose, but it didn't work. I didn't feel enough.
Right.
And I realized the sense of purpose that I had taken on didn't fit me particularly well. I didn't like hanging out with other doctors. I didn't like it when people referred to me as a doctor. I did like some of the work. There was some of it that really did fill me up, but a lot of it I didn't enjoy the process of doing. And so only when I realized that that version of big P purpose wasn't serving me and started looking at what really does serve me, what lights me up, what do I love doing, like writing and podcasting and public speaking, only then did I truly feel lit up and felt much happier. And not only that, but made better connections and really felt like my daily activities were matching who I was. And so that was the first time. And so I think a lot of us go through this where we are programmed to become something and we're told that that's what value looks like in our life. And so we chase it. And the problem is a lot of us get there and find it really isn't fulfilling our needs.
So in the book, you talk about this idea of creating purpose rather than finding it. I think a lot of us just kind of actually do search for it. And in fact, Jason and I just had a recent conversation where I was trying on different personas, like, oh, I'm this explorer persona, or I'm the traveler, or I'm the creative. And so in the book, you're just talking about this, like creating it. So for those people that come up to you, after your public speaking gig and they say, hey, this finding purpose thing, it's not so easy. Like, I don't want to do it. If you're a fire adherent, your purpose, I think a lot of people see that as accumulation, saving, investing. Like that feels like, achievable, right? But what does creating purpose look like when those goals are sort of either on autopilot and you're in the messy middle, or when those goals are behind them and they're not really a goal anymore? What does the creating purpose look like?
So first of all, I definitely say you don't find purpose, because this idea of finding purpose takes all the agency away from you. It's like it either falls on my head and I live the best life ever, or I don't find it and everything is lost. But purpose is about the present and future, and it's about action. So it is true, we have to know what those inklings, those beckonings are, the things that really kind of light us up. So I call those purpose anchors. So we have to get in touch with what those are. But after you have an idea of what feels like an anchor to purpose in your life, you then have to actively build it. And this won't be easy. You actually have to build it and take action. But what I really like about that is if we can connect to those interests, those things that cause us excitement, what I call purpose anchors, then all the agency really comes right to us. It's up to us to then build activities around these things. And so I think that's the real magic. The problem with feeling like money or even career is purpose is a lot of time that's a mirage. So if you start thinking that money is purpose, if financial independence is your purpose, it's a great tool, but not a great goal, because what does that money actually get you? What we really want to ask is, why do we want money? I don't want to work anymore. Well, why don't you want to work anymore? Because I want to do the things I want to do. Well, what do you want to do? And that's where we start getting to the heart of what this is about. Money is a great tool, and it's wonderful if you get to financial independence and use that tool to have enough free time and space to do the things that are purposeful for you. But let me tell you something secret. Money is one of many tools, and you can start doing the things you really want to do now, whether you're financially independent or not. And so I think you're missing the boat if you're saying kind of once I have or once I am. Once I have enough money or once I am retired, then you're really kind of putting off life. And we all know this. Life is limited. My dad died at 40. I could die anytime. I'm 51. I've already gotten 11 more years than he got. Why would I ever put it off 5, 10 years in service of money? And it's not that money's bad, and it's not that sometimes you do have to sacrifice for money, because I think that's reasonable. But you should really have your purpose in view and start working on it now and integrating it into your life now. And when you realize that purpose isn't this big, complicated, ephemeral thing, but instead this little abundant thing where you can find almost anywhere in life, it gets much easier. Like, how do we just build that into our life? Even if you're stuck in a 9 to 5, how do we do something purposeful on Saturday or Sunday? How do we do something purposeful on nights when you're not working? How do we fill up more of that precious time with things that are meaningful to us?
And I think that's at the heart of the question, right? This idea of creating purpose. And I think a lot of people, when they listen to conversations like this, their natural reaction still is, well, I don't know how to do that. And so is there, you've said a couple things that kind of resonate with me, but are there exercises or things that you could describe, even at a high level, that would guide someone in how to think through, how do I create my purpose? What are the things that make me truly happy that I could put more energy into?
And I want to add to this because before you answer, Jordan, because my wife comes to mind immediately. So she's getting ready. She's got something like 10 days of work left in her entire career as a scientist. And
Wow.
she has tied this idea of purpose to provide for my family. And that's connected to a paycheck and having a steady job and the sort of certainty that comes with that. And once that goes away, I can already see that she's like, well, what is my purpose? Like, how do I do this? And so you're going to answer this question, I hope, with her in mind.
So basically, it's a two-step process. One, you have to identify your purpose anchors, and then you have to build a life of purpose around them, what I call the climb. So, right, identify purpose anchors, begin the climb. So let's talk about purpose anchors. I'm not going to go into huge depth, and in the book, there's a series of exercises that goes through this, but there's some simple ways to identify your purpose anchors. Let me tell you about a few of them. One, we talked about the life review with my last book, this series of questions we go through as a hospice doctor with our patients. But I want to specifically talk about regret, because that's part of the life review with dying patients. And we ask them, what do you regret that you never had the energy, courage, or time to do? We don't have agency when we're dying, so it's really disappointing to think about regrets because you can't do anything about it. But guess what?
Right.
When you're young and healthy, regrets can be a great purpose anchor. If you can think about what you would regret on your dying deathbed if you didn't accomplish it, and then use that today to build a life of purpose around that idea, that's a great purpose anchor. So number one, look at regrets. Number two, joys of childhood. Like most of us as kids joyfully go into purpose before society has told us who to be. We go ahead and play games and get lost all day and forget time and just enjoy ourselves with no goal in mind. So I tell people, go back to your childhood room. What were the posters? What were the trophies? What were the drawings? What lit you up back then? Could that be a purpose anchor now? A lot of times we drop that stuff when we get serious about school and career, but usually that stuff lights us up. I loved baseball cards as a kid. I'm so busy I don't have time, but if I ever want to find something joyful to go back to, every time I see something about baseball cards on Facebook or in the news, it totally lights me up. I could totally build some purpose around that.
Awesome, yeah.
So that's two, joys of childhood. Three, art of subtraction. We've talked about this before with my other book, but basically look at your job, get rid of everything you hate. Is there anything you love? A lot of people say, I hate my job, but you know what? I love Thursday mornings when I go into the back room and I stock all the shelves. And for that 2 hours, I love the organization. This is the thing I like.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's a purpose anchor. You may hate your job, but there might be a piece of it you love. I got tired of being a physician, but I loved hospice work. I'd do it even if no one was paying me for it. So I knew that was a purpose anchor. And last but not least, if none of that is working, it's the spaghetti method. Throw a bunch of things against the wall and see what sticks. It means saying yes to people you normally don't say yes to, doing things you don't normally do, maybe making yourself feel a little uncomfortable for a day. And if any of that sparks some joy or interest, or you're like, I'd like to do that another day, then that could be a purpose anchor. And so I think those are some really easy ways to think about purpose anchors. After that, and here's where the abundance comes in. I love X, right? I love stocking shelves. Well, maybe I could ask my boss that I could go around to all the different restaurants that we own, and I could stock shelves in all the different places Monday through Friday, and I could stop working at the front counter, which I hate. Maybe I could become an organizing expert, and on weekends as a side hustle, I could go to people's houses and help them organize. Maybe I could join the Marie Kondo Association. I don't know if there is such thing. And I could be the head of the Marie Kondo Association. All of these are climbs, purposeful activities built off these purpose anchors. One last thing I want to say, Eric, you mentioned your wife, and providing for your family has always been purpose to her. I want to warn people. I think we're misguided if we make other people our purpose. And all sorts of parents get mad at me when I say this. They're like, no, my family is my purpose. My kids are my purpose.
Right.
Here's my argument. You want to show your kids that you can be involved in little p purpose and do things that light you up because you want to model that behavior for them. Because when you look at your kids, You want them when they become adults to be able to do things that light them up. You don't only want them to focus on their family. You want them to develop themselves and enjoy themselves and do things that deeply make them feel connected to whatever activity they're doing. Because guess what? Maybe your kid can have kids. Maybe they never find a spouse. Maybe the world changes and people don't have kids anymore. Who knows? We don't know what the future brings. But if you model that behavior of pursuing little p purpose, you're much more likely to help them live a life of purpose also.
For people who are striving for financial independence, people who are working, some of these discussions can feel like, this idea of contemplating purpose, that's only for you guys. It's only for you guys who have reached FI or, who have already retired, for the wealthy.
A lot of people say, well, it's easy for you. You were a doctor, you got to financial independence. Of course you can talk about purpose. Here's what I say to those people. I want everybody to win the game. So the question is, what is winning the game? I like to think about time, and you guys have heard me say this before. We were born one day and we die another, and we have very little control over how much time that is.
Yeah.
And yes, you can wear your seatbelt and exercise and do a few things, but generally it's set and there's nothing we can do about it. And you can't buy time, you can't sell it, you can't trade it. Basically, time passes no matter what you do. And so all you can control is what activities you're involved in as time passes. So here's winning the game. If you look at life as a series of time slots, days, weeks, months, years, basically, you want to fill as many of those time slots with little p purpose, things you enjoy, things that light you up, and get rid of as many things that you loathe. And that is our job as human beings, is to basically continually look at our calendar and improve that equation, improve that calculus through time. So it's fine. You can say, I don't have time. You can say, I don't have money. You can say, I don't have the tools that I need to do this. But what you're really saying is that I'm giving up my chance at filling this time with better activities. Yeah. Now, I would argue that we actually have lots of tools and money is only one of them. And I would argue that we also have some levers that we can use to bring purpose into our life regardless of our financial situation. But I'd like everyone to win the game, which means we should always be trying to bring in more purpose and get rid of things we don't like.
Yeah. I think that's really apt, and Jordan, it kind of ties together two of the buckets we've talked about here. And that is this idea of the things that bring you joy, and that being a useful way, whether you're referring back to childhood or otherwise, although I think childhood turns out to be an excellent model for this. Because many of those things can fit at any time. And when I think about the things that make me the happiest now, and I have spent a lot of the last 4.5 years throwing things at the wall using your spaghetti model. But when I look at the things that actually make me happiest and create small p purpose, most of those are things I could have done while I was still working. And honestly, they had just fallen by the wayside. Things like cooking. Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. Maybe with my commute schedule and my exhaustion that most of us feel at the end of long days working, maybe those weren't the best days to cook something. Maybe heating something up or having a salad makes sense. But on the weekend, honestly, I had no excuse to be cooking as little as I did. And my wife kind of picked up the slack for a lot of years there. Now that's something I get a lot of enjoyment out of. And maybe it's nothing elaborate, but it's just creating something that other people enjoy, or switching off cooking to programming, right? When I think about it as a kid in particular, in the dawn of the personal computing age, I was one of those kids who was super into computers. I didn't end up making it a career because I thought medicine was going to be that, and that turned into a research path, but I always enjoyed that. And when I think now about the thing that I fill more hours with on a given week than anything, besides travel, when we're actually traveling, it's thinking through problems, creating solutions to them. And in the beginning, I thought it might be something I could monetize. But honestly, these days, that's the farthest thing from the front. I just enjoy problem solving, creating, and kind of using my brain that way. And that is something I really hadn't done since I was a kid. And so this idea of these things can, really harken back that far, I think is entirely valid.
And I want to make the point, the two big excuses are I don't have time and I don't have enough money. So let's talk about the I don't have enough time. Well, the American Time survey done by the US Bureau of Labor basically is done every few years and shows that most Americans have on average 5 hours of free time a day, and people in lower socioeconomic classes actually have a little bit more. So the likelihood you truly don't have time to add in a little purposeful activity in your life is probably not true. So that's time. Let's talk about money. There are lots of ways to talk about this. And you guys know there have been tons of studies about the connection between wealth and happiness. We've heard of Kahneman and Deaton and Killingsworth, and they did a bunch of studies. And most of them were either retrospective, meaning they looked at past data that was collected for other reasons, or very short-term prospective studies. Killingsworth was like texting people multiple times a day for like weeks or months on end and then making conclusions based on that. But let's look at the most enduring study of happiness ever done, at least that I know of, was the Harvard Developmental Adult Health Study. Started in the early 1900s. They took like 700 Harvard students, interviewed them every 2 years, eventually brought in like a few thousand other family members, eventually then brought in a few controls from the Boston area, and they studied them for like over 80 years. And after 80 years, and not only did they do surveys every 2 years, they started doing blood tests. Eventually, they did MRIs, EEGs. I mean, they studied the heck out of these people. And after 80 years, they came to the conclusion that there was one thing very strongly associated with happiness. And it wasn't money, and it wasn't career, and it wasn't achievements. It wasn't even purpose, which I'll talk about in a moment. It was interpersonal connections. Interpersonal connections. Yeah. And so what I glean from the studies, you can say I don't have enough money as much as you want, but I don't think it's money that brings people happiness. Now, I mentioned it wasn't purpose, but then I also said that purpose has been shown to be connected to health, happiness, and longevity. This goes along with my hypothesis, actually. I believe little p purpose is a conduit to community and connections, interpersonal relationships. Basically, when you do things that light you up, that you enjoy the process of doing, like a moth to the flame, other people see you lit up and they come close. They want to learn from you. They want to teach you. They want to collaborate with you. They're attracted to you. And that's where communities begin. And I think this is the real key to happiness. I think we pursue little p purpose. I think it connects us to other people. I think we change those people and they change us. And that gives us a sense of happiness and also legacy and impact, because when people see us lit up, we affect them, and those effects can be enduring.
I did want to transition to this topic of purpose anxiety. And you talk about this in your book, how people can feel stressed when they really don't know their purpose. And I don't know. I saw this in Jason. I thought I saw this in Jason through his retirement, where many people who early retire or otherwise retire just describe this sense of kind of aimlessness after leaving work because they do tie work to their purpose. So do you think purpose anxiety is just inevitable? Like, is it just part of the process, or is it really just a failure to plan beyond the financial goals, which we all want to do, and it's easy to do those things?
I think purpose anxiety is inevitable in today's society because I think, again, we're getting all these messages of what purpose is supposed to look like. And it involves making money, and it involves looking good, and it involves luxurious travel, and it involves all these things. And we're continuously told by society that that's what we're supposed to do. So what happens when you say, I'm out, I have enough money, and I'm stepping off the treadmill? That goes against everything society has told us purpose should look like. So of course we're going to feel anxiety. We're going to feel anxiety because we've been told that there's this big thing waiting for us. And if we just make the right moves, we're going to be amazing. We're going to be killing it. We're going to be fixing the world's problems. We're going to be famous. We're going to have huge impact and legacy. We're going to make tons of money. This is what society has been telling us for so long. And so it's really hard to step away from that. But not only just to step away from it, it's really hard if you're living a life that doesn't live up to that. And so you start feeling anxiety immediately because you're like, oh, I'm just a normal CPA. Like, I help people, I make an average salary, and that's it. And that doesn't fit with what society's telling me I'm supposed to be. So I must not have my purpose right.
But do you also
If I
feel
got
like,
my
does it also feel like a part of the process of retiring, I guess is my question too? Because, you know, I mean, both of you are retired. I'm not there yet, or retired. I know it doesn't feel probably like retirement to you, Doc G, but, or maybe it's someone else looking as an outsider, but isn't there a process that you go through? You know, you're like excited the day you retire and you leave obligation behind. You have all this freedom. And then, you know, you kind of step into this space of like, oh, this is the freedom I bought, but is this what I want? I mean, aren't we all going to go through that? And isn't like even the small P purpose, isn't that part of like finding that? Isn't that part of the process?
I don't know if we're all going to go through that.
Okay.
So I found that retirees have two patterns that I can see, at least the ones who are thoughtful about it, right? They're the retirees who are so burned out and exhausted that they can't even think about anything like purpose. They need to retire, take 6 months off, rest, relax, do the things, and then they start getting jumpy, antsy, and start thinking about purpose and go through that process.
Yes.
But that's only one group of people. I know plenty of people who have planned for the retirement. They've really thought deeply about what they want to do. They've scheduled themselves for all sorts of things. And actually, they know the exact opposite. If they stop working and don't have something to retire to, will feel antsy. I think either of those are fine. I think the problem comes when people don't do the deeper thinking about purpose. So they think retirement is the purpose or a net worth number is the purpose. Yeah. And that's when they have problems, when they get to that place and realize that those are kind of mirages, right? Yeah, they're not the thing itself. They're tools we use towards achieving the thing. And so if you spent all your time worrying about the tool, but never thought about what that tool is supposed to do for you, it leads to confusion and anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's really well put, and speaks to someone who's been through this process and talked to many more people who have. I think, and something Eric and I have been pretty open about, and I believe we even talked with you about in our last conversation, this idea that so much of the focus on the fire community is on the mechanical. And we see it too. Our conversations on mechanical or financial topics are much more,
very popular.
The view counts are much higher, much higher than anything we do. Although the people who stick with us say they stick with us for the softer stuff, the life experience sharing, those types of things. But, you know, I always come back to this quote, and I didn't remember the exact wording, but I picked it up when I listened to our earlier conversation with you, and that is, money is only as good as it buys you the ability to do something else that's more meaningful. And that is it, I think, at the end of the day. And yes, it's important to have all your ducks in a row when you're making big financial decisions, but to do that at the sole focus without any effort and thinking about small p purpose and what brings meaning to our life, that is a path that is perilous and will lead you to this anxiety. I can't see how it doesn't.
Let me suggest something here. The reason people love talking about the finances and you get the most hits off of those, and yet you don't get as much of them, the softer stuff, is because people think there's an answer to the finances and they think there isn't an answer to things like purpose. And in fact, that's the whole reason I wrote this book, is I would like to give you a template that makes figuring out your purpose as easy as figuring out your FI number. But I don't think anyone's ever really presented it that way. Yeah. Everyone's always presented purpose is this ephemeral thing that like you kind of find, but I'm not sure how you do it. And it's supposed to be so important and it's supposed to make your life good, but I don't know how it makes my life good. And I'm not sure where to look. I think if we made purpose as straightforward as calculating your FI number, a lot more people would engage in that conversation. And in fact, that's what I really hope this book does.
Yeah, you've given lots of examples in the book, and you have lots of exercises in there, practical exercises. It's dense with information, and it's perfectly on topic for the things that you've been talking about and the life you've been living. So congratulations on it. Where can people find it? Where do you want people to find it? Because I'm sure it's available on Amazon, but I don't know what's best for you.
Best thing to do is go to jordangrumet.com. That's JORDANGRUMET.com. There you can see links to both of my books, Taking Stock and The Purpose Code, as well as all the places I create content. Currently, that's mostly at the Earn and Invest podcast and the Purpose Code Substack. But there are also links to my old medical blog and my personal finance blog. All of that is at jordangrumet.com.
That's great. And we will be sure to link to that in the description. And if you're listening to this, the book is available. So do what we did and check it out, because it really, as Eric said, is just full of valuable information. We only have enough time to scratch the surface of some of the key themes today. So Jordan, from me as well, thanks so much for putting this together and for taking the time to talk with us. It was great, as it has been the previous times.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, fellas, for having me. I appreciate it.